Welcome to Celebrating Mom, the Heart of Recovery. My name is Danny Gillity, the Executive Director at the Eating Disorder Foundation, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone here tonight. Tonight's workshop is brought to you in collaboration with the Eating Disorder Foundation and Equip. The Eating Disorder Foundation was founded in 2003 with a mission to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through free and accessible education, support, and advocacy. We are a Denver-based nonprofit that is now serving individuals and families both nationally and internationally. Equip makes gold standard eating disorder care accessible to all people through family-based treatment delivered at home for lasting recovery. Created by experts in the field and people who've been there, Equip builds upon this model of care by providing families with a dedicated 5-person care team, including a therapist, dietitian, physician, and peer and family mentor. To get in touch with Equip, please reach out to Equip's Community Partnership Senior Manager, Jessica Hickman, at jessica@equip.health. And I will be sure to put our link as well as Equip's information in the chat for you all. If you have questions for our presenters, I invite you to use the chat feature to communicate with me directly throughout the workshop. The chat is kept confidential and will come to me directly. We will save time for Q&A after the presentation, and I will deliver the questions to our panel. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator. JD Ouellette is the Director of Lived Experience at Equip. She previously developed and ran Equip's mentorship department. When she helped her youngest daughter recover from anorexia a decade ago, it ignited a passion to offer hope and mentorship to other families in the same way other families provided that for hers. In 2019, she left her career in education to work in the eating disorder space and is excited to be part of the work of enhancing FBT to work for even more people and to provide access to evidence-based care that is not limited by geography. So I'd like to welcome our moderator, JD, and our panelists, Krista and her daughter, Yana, and Christine and her daughter, Pepper. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us here today and for the work that EDF does. I'm struck by the fact that, wanting to provide education and access is your mission. It's certainly my mission. I know it's Christine and Pepper and Krista and Yana's mission as well. And so we're all so happy to be here. And thank you so much, folks, for joining us. So a little bit about my story before we introduce everyone else. Again, it was a decade ago that my daughter got sick. She developed anorexia as a 17-year-old. We were incredibly lucky to have very rapid access to evidence-based care at UC San Diego using an FBT format. And there's no eating disorder journey that is easy. I always tell people our choices are between hardest and hardester. That's all we have. We don't even get just hard or harder. We got to go all the way to the end. However, it was successful, and she's been in full recovery for about 7 years now and lives completely free of an eating disorder. And so it's my passion to really provide families with the education they need to understand the illness, to support their loved one, and to do the best that they can in getting the care that they need. So Christina and Pepper, before we get started with some questions, would love to hear just a little bit about the two of you and your journey.
Yeah, sure. My name is Pepper, and we live outside of Seattle, Washington. And I had an eating disorder for 10 years, and now I've been recovered for 12 years. And along the journey, we became advocates really early on, speaking and sharing our story on various platforms, and we've done that for many years. And so I'm excited to have this opportunity to share our story as mother and daughter.
And I'm Christine, and I am a therapist at Equip. And during our journey and speaking as advocates and trying to just help another family go through, the ups and downs of an eating disorder, we decided that we would become therapists. So yes. We're both therapists.
I forgot to mention I'm a mental health therapist.
And so thank you for having us today. We're happy to be here and help anyone that it will help.
Yeah, and we've got a little bit of a theme here of, changing jobs. I know you didn't start out as a therapist. in order to really help the field. This is such a life-changing experience for everyone. So thanks. Christina, Yana.
Hi, I'm Yana Nielsen. I am 18 years old and I struggled with disordered eating from ages 14 to 16. I've been in recovery for 2 years and I'm still in high school, so I don't have anything to really say that I'm, doing with my experience yet, but I'm hoping to go into the field of eating disorder psychiatry or something similar, or give back in some way. And yeah, I've had a bit of a up and down kind of journey through all this, but I'm glad to be where I am today.
Yeah, thank you for having us. My name is Krista, and I am a family mentor for Equip. I first connected with JD when we were living in Denmark and Yana became ill. JD, I always say, was my first and most important mentor in this journey. So I was just really fortunate to connect with her and get the support and tools that we needed to get Yana fully recovered. I'm also super grateful to now be in the position to do that for other families.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so happy, Pepper and Yana, particularly to have you here to speak about your experience. It's really very recent that people who were impacted by an eating disorder felt like they could use their own voice and have power in that. And Yana, I just want to say to you, you are already doing the work by being here. You are doing the work. So one of the things that is especially important to me and really feeds into this theme of mothers and daughters, and I want to also acknowledge that we're using the term mother in a really broadly expansive way. That doesn't necessarily have to be biological. Many people, including myself, have mothered children that are not, their biological children, and it's just as powerful a relationship. So we're really talking about those support figures in your lives, and dads will get their due as well. They're very important. But this is, around the time of Mother's Day, and so we're in that mode. And I think one of the things that is so powerful is to hear stories from mothers and daughters, or parents and children, caregivers and the people that they care for, that really speak to the relationships that they've developed on the other side of this. I know in our journey, I did FBT with someone from the ages of 17 to 20. FBT is not a treatment model known for giving young adults the ultimate independence that young people at that time of their life crave. So it was a very fraught process, extremely, extremely hard at times, with a lot of emotional dysregulation. And I know for me as a mother, many times where I felt like I had to make the decision to potentially sacrifice my relationship with my daughter in order to help her beat the eating disorder. And am gratified that, just as Pepper and Yana are so open in their discussions, my daughter is as well. And we've had many discussions since she's gotten well, where she talks about the fact that, oh, remember that one time and you were bawling your eyes out because you were so, I was coming at you saying it's not the eating disorder and you're trying to control me, and you were crying and full of self-doubt. Yeah, that was the eating disorder, right? So just really want to plant that seed that for people who are able to get through the process, and even though there's some natural, almost always some sort of natural tension in the recovery process, given some of the realities of eating disorders being very self-protective and not wanting to be eliminated, that if and when we can get our loved ones, help them to full health, those relationships do tend to be really, really robust, and there's a lot of gratitude and things like that. So most 19-year-olds aren't going to sort of thank you for your sacrifices, but by the time they get to around 23 or 24, they're like, oh, okay, that was a lot. So I'm going to just start asking some questions, and if any of the questions that we discuss spark things with you, go ahead and put those in the chat. We'll get to all of those things. So sort of anything that's on your mind today. But I'm going to throw this out first of all, Christina and Pepper, and I know you had a really very, very complicated journey, not just with the eating disorder during your time, but how did family play a role in your recovery journey, Pepper?
Well, I want to preface it with the difficult part of our journey is that I had had an eating disorder since I was 12, but didn't know it at the time. And I was diagnosed when I was 17. And a few months after I was diagnosed, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. So the entire journey of me in recovery from an eating disorder, my dad had cancer at the same time. So that really complicated things. But your question about how support played a role in the journey
Just gotta
is
use the
that
laptop on me. Buzz, yeah, all good.
So it played a role in that my parents were always there for me. They would go to family nights and support me. Even though I was 17 and in my young adult life, my dad, even though he was sick, he went to family nights. And I think that's, regardless of my age, just them being there for me. Also, my mom created an open line of communication. So it didn't matter if it was day or night. I could always go to talk to her. And I had, at the time, able to like kind of differentiate between myself and the eating disorder voice. And so I was able to like let her know when I was really upset that was the eating disorder. And then, then there were parts of me that could shine through.
Yeah, that's so important, that beginning to differentiate, that externalization, which, sometimes parents sometimes will describe having a hard time with that because their loved one, their child is sort of like not into that idea. And I always let them know you can do it even in your head silently. And that is a skill that I found super helpful through that, was to just reframe every sort of like the really awful negative stuff. Instead of saying my daughter did, or my daughter, said, or whatever, my daughter's eating disorder said, my daughter's eating disorder did. And I think it does really help, but that's like a really tangible skill that is able to keep and nurture that love piece of it and that open communication piece of it, separate from the conflict. So thanks for highlighting that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yana, how would you answer that question?
Could you just repeat the question, because it was a while ago that you said it?
Oh yeah. So just like, how did your family play a role in supporting you through your journey? Just very broad
Oh,
question.
okay. So, well, my dad, speaking of family nights, he used to work really long hours, but still he would go to the family nights in Denmark and listen to the stories of other parents that were, in tears and, so frustrated with how the system had treated their children too. I think it kind of gave him a little bit of motivation too, because, he was able to see that some people were able to get out of it, but then also that, it could have been worse. He learned about, different parenting styles and how to better approach it, but, he never was really able to apply it because he wasn't home as much as my mom was. My mom was the one that pretty much like held my hand through all my meals, even the good ones and the bad ones. She was the one that took me to the grocery store, and she was the one that was checking up on me, and she was the one that
Coming to school twice a day.
I was gonna say that. She came to school twice a day to make sure that I was eating. She would eat with me in the car. I would be screaming and crying, and why did you make me such high calorie food? But she put up with it. She cried with me. She took me to my therapist appointments that I didn't want to go to. And she did the research about treatment, and she found where I had to go. So I don't know, she was the pioneer in that way, because I couldn't do it for myself.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such an important point in all of this, that very often, and I know when I talk to parents about that, I say we have to really figure out, is it will or won't, will and won't, or can and can't? Because if it's won't, that's one thing, but if it's can't, that's like a whole nother thing. And it really, I think when you as a parent kind of can tease that out and differentiate, it becomes maybe a little bit easier to say, I've got to take control of this situation, right? So very often I will say that, right, it's the parent deciding or the eating disorder deciding, and really trust the parent's motives a lot more than the eating disorder's motives. So, so I'm going to assume too, in all of that, what you said, that like our home, there were tears, and there were things said, and there were potentially things thrown and tables flipped, and that sort of thing. Does that feel accurate for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a result of that, I think again, one of the big worries, and especially, you were a young adult, Pepper, my daughter was a young adult as well. And I know that was a huge thing, and a huge thing I hear from a lot of other parents is that like that 17, 18, how can it be appropriate to sort of like really take over for them? And again, if you sort of think, well, it's a choice between sort of them leaving them to the mercy of the eating disorder or taking over, even in the face of a lot of pushback, that sort of changes the dynamic of that. And I think that one thing that many parents, I know it's one thing that many parents worried about, it's a thing that I worried about a lot. Will this ruin my relationship with my child? Sort of because normal messages we get from society are really centered very much around individualism and autonomy. And it feels super, super awful as a parent to be controlling sort of your young adult child. So I know I really worried, like, how is this going to impact our relationship, sort of for the long term? I'm just curious, we'll start with you, Kristen and Yana, this time. How do you feel like having had all those heated battles and all that stuff? Where are you now? How did you go through things in terms of your relationship together?
Well, we definitely don't scream at each other anymore. So, it doesn't last. And it did really hurt in the moment. I didn't like, being yelled at and, being chased back to my room and being locked into my room while my parents went through my stuff, and I know it was out of love, but, it's so hard even now to, remember that in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Although I know that if I was in her situation, I probably would do something similar, because I can't even imagine what it would be like trying to deal with somebody as frustrating as I was. I was extremely stubborn and not cooperative in the slightest. So I feel bad, really, for her, but I don't think it ruined our relationship, because, we get along very well now. And I wouldn't even say that it's better than it was when, before I had any issues, but it's the most I can ask for is that it's back to what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that, now I feel even more so than before that I can come to her with issues and, not be afraid of what she's going to think. And, I can be really, really upset and she'll still listen, because she's already seen the craziest part of who I can be. So nothing can really top whatever I can't really do much worse than eating disorder me. So, and I know that when she was getting upset and screaming and yelling, she wasn't mad at me. She was mad at my eating disorder, and she was trying to fight it, not me. And, I can forgive her for all the times that, we had a bit of a fight, but I'm sure she can also forgive me too, because it wasn't really me. Just like I didn't think it was really her either. It's, that kind of desperate persona that comes out when you need to fight for your kid. So I'm not a mother, but I can kind of see why she was, so angry now looking back on it. But, of course it was easy to say, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Like, you're the worst. I wish I didn't live at home. I want to run away. But like, it's all just stupid eating disorder stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's so lovely that you're talking about the grace that you've shown each other throughout this, right? And I so when I hear the yelling, Chris, on your side, right? I think it's like we get all the skills that we can, and there are a lot of really practical skills that we can acquire. These are things we actually can get training in. And even with all of the best, we can kind of only hope to get there like 80 to 90% of the time, because we're still human beings and not robots. And there's the fear and the frustration that we feel at times. You're going to go off script sometimes. But yeah, how would you sort of answer this, Kristen, in terms of your relationship today?
Okay, well, I do think that Yana is probably a little hyper focused on maybe a few times that things got a little bit out of control, because honestly, I think that our situation going through this, like, we were pretty calm most of the time. And Yana honestly was not, well, Yana was not the worst in terms of her eating disorder coming out. I mean, she was trying so hard to still be the Yana, the sweet Yana that she always was, but the eating disorder was forcing her to act outside of her values. I mean, absolutely. She'd never like eat so much as told a lie before the eating disorder came to town. And then she's, hiding and lying and,
Well, I had to lie, otherwise it wouldn't have worked.
well, yeah.
So
Yes.
you kind of have to sacrifice, my values
Yes.
were don't keep anything from your parents, you can
Yep.
trust your mom first. And I would, that was one of the things that I was most guilty about, that my mom that I had trusted, and, she told me everything. I told her everything. She was my best friend. The fact that I was going against her when all she was trying to do is help me, that was something also that really pushed me towards recovery, because, who am I to, she raised me, she took care of me, she fed me, and why am I denying her now? Like, who am I to give up on her when, she obviously hasn't given up on me, so.
Yanni, or Christy, you used a phrase that we like to use a lot at Quip, which is behaving outside their values. And so, again, that really goes to the helpfulness of externalizing the eating disorder, I think. And I know was super powerful for me as well in terms of just sort of looking at sort of what was in front of me and thinking, was this my daughter from a year ago? Decidedly not. Just decidedly would not speak to me that way. My own true daughter did not throw things at me while I was cooking, did not, call me horrible names and things like that. And having the training and the understanding that the eating disorder will do whatever it can to drive that wedge, that it's like a very deliberate tactic on the eating disorders part, was helpful to me, because I'm a highly competitive person. So if you are trying to make me do that thing and it's not in my benefit to do it, I may manage to come out on top, just because I don't like to lose in that situation. Christina Pepper, how would you?
Yeah. Well, I'd say before I had an eating disorder, when I was younger, we had a really good relationship. And then in my teen years, I had an eating disorder, but didn't know it. And so what my mom thought was just a normal teenage anger was something more than that. And I think getting diagnosed at 17 is when I really then showed the eating disorder behaviors and the anger between that. And we did not get along at all for many years. And I think what was really difficult is that right before I was diagnosed, right after that, my dad got cancer. And then a few months later, I went off to college. So I was trying to exert being an individual and being out on my own, but at the same time I'm unwell and having to come home for doctor's appointments, and my mom trying to let me be independent, but at the same time I'm not well. And so there were during that period of time, I refused to hug my mom. I really wanted nothing to do with her. I just wanted her to leave me alone. And one Mother's Day, I just totally skipped it. She drove 4 hours to come pick me up, and I basically hid from her. And finally she got me and drove me home. But I definitely behaved outside of myself. I just, it's such a difficult thing wanting to be an individual and go off to college and have that life. And at the same time, my mom trying to rein me in and help me get well.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of spurred something in me is when you said we're also human beings, because I remember, in one of the screaming matches with Ed and saying, well, you don't yell at your best friend's mother like this, and I'm just a human being, and this, and so it's touching into those things. So we did have a pretty tumultuous time up front, and then once we got to a better place, I actually would go in, because I knew she suffered a lot at night by herself, so I'd actually go in and poke the bear and go, I can see something's going on. So sometimes I would try to have her engage with me no matter what was going to go on or not. And I think one of the things is that as far as helping her through this, and also, I actually, at some points, I wasn't too worried about our relationship, because she also could see that her dad was sick and I was in charge of what was going on for him. And I would talk with her. It's no matter what goes on, if I see you're in a state where you can't make decisions for yourself, I'm going to make them for you. And she was willing enough. The Pepper I could see some of the time was willing enough. And so I would wait and talk to her then.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such an important point, and we actually had a lot more pushback on in terms of that sort of idea that you're talking about, that whatever I'm doing for him, I'll do for you. And so we had, for me, it was very important to have all the legal paperwork and power of attorney and all that, releases and all that was important enough to me that we actually leveraged that at 18, have used some leverage, like, if you want to continue to use this car that we call your car, but it's not really your car, it's really my car, our car, like, we're going to require these signatures and things like that. So, and even with the pushback, there was acceptance pretty quickly. So there was a lot of a fight, but then there was acceptance. And I actually, that dynamic you're talking about, when we had we sort of had to have a law enforcement backup plan that we walked through in terms of keeping me safe during the refeeding period, just in case it was needed. And we never had to use it. And I think as I reflect upon that, whenever it got very close to that, one of the things I would do was I would use her name a lot to try and de-escalate at that point. But I think that she was more afraid of me not being in control. Like, she hated me being in control, but she was actually more afraid of me not being in control. And so that was a very interesting thing that I would always say, like, reminding you that if the police come, once they enter here, I don't call the shots anymore. They make all the decisions, so, and I think that was that part would always get through to the authentic her during a really escalated situation. I found a very interesting dynamic is that my daughter does not remember some of the worst pieces of it. So, we did FBT in our home, refeeding, a lot of food. And so that some of that really pitched escalation and things like that, years later, oh, I don't remember that. And you're like, you don't remember the worst day of my life and you were there? But in some ways I'm happy about it as well, because she doesn't actually need those memories.
When we were talking about Mother's Day,
like prior to like doing this, we were looking at the questions and she said something and I was like, I don't remember that. I think there's like periods of time where, it's been like, 15 years since we were going through that. But at the same time, I was unwell. So there's parts I don't remember. And I know that was like a really painful experience for her. So can see how that might be a little invalidating, but, we got through it, and our relationship is really great now. And I think something that she was saying, like she's looking for that Pepper inside of me. We would at the time make mixed CDs of music because we love music. So when we're on our way she's taking me to treatment, we're listening to music in the car. So I think it's sort of like, reaching like who their authentic self is, even if you can only see like a little teeny bit, and finding those things that you used to enjoy together. And that wasn't always the case. I was always, yelling at her or something like that in the car too. But I think just trying to like reach that little person inside of me. But yeah, we have a really great relationship now. We go to concerts. She's my neighbor, so I come over for coffee every day. And we both, went back to school to become therapists because, we went through that and want to help people get through it too.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. It's and it's interesting too. Thank you for sharing that. That was really, really helpful. So I'm wondering, you had other people in your lives. Christine, you certainly had a lot to balance. Chris, I know you have another, child as well. How did that work for you all during this really active time of fighting the illness with managing everyone's needs?
I'll go. So what I did is I just figured out what I did is each had a treatment team. So my husband had his whole team taking care of him with cancer, and she had her eating disorder treatment team. And the treatment we were going through was a lot of years ago where there wasn't, it was different than it is now. Yeah. But what I did is I would inform both, whomever was involved, what I was going through with the other one. So then I would actually hand it over to the professionals. I'd say, so my husband was in the hospital and I kept trying to get him out of the hospital, but he couldn't come home. And I said, well, I told his doctor, you're going to have to let me know when he's ready. I keep pushing you because my daughter's home suffering from an eating disorder and I'm here. And so I had to, and have them help me make the best decisions for each one of them, because for me it's like I had that drive to have them home together, and it wasn't in the best interest of my husband at the time, that when he was sick.
I appreciate what you said about you needed them to help you, and I know that was like a big part of my thing, was learning that I cannot always be the helper. I must sometimes be the helpee. And that it was very humbling to do that. And also really, that's another good shift, I think, is that ability to sort of ask for help. You certainly did it in a very worrisome, very hard situation. How about you, Krista?
Well, I mean, our situation was just very complicated. So, we were in Denmark and we lived actually quite a good enough distance away from any of my husband's Danish family. So it was kind of just me, myself, and I trying to manage Yana and her younger sister, Eva. I mean, I guess I just framed it that I needed to do whatever it takes. So, I did the best that I could, but I had to prioritize Yana's health first. It did work out, going to her school twice a day, once for snack, once for lunch, while Eva was at her school. Yeah, I mean, it was stressful for certain, but the end goal was just to get Yana well. And when we came back to the United States, we were fortunate enough to stay for a period of time, a month, with my aunt and uncle while Yana was stabilized in the hospital. And then we, from there, left for ERC Denver and stayed at the 5-star Ronald McDonald House, which was fabulous. Yeah, and Eva, I have to give her a lot of credit. You always hear that kids are resilient. Eva was dragged from, Denmark back to Maryland on a plane to Denver in the Ronald McDonald House. Her sister is, staying in residential treatment. And, she just rolled with the punches. And, we tried to go out and do fun things, when we could. My husband was still in Denmark. Yeah, so it was I don't know, it was just a whirlwind, but all you can do is the best you can and just keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah, I go ahead.
Can I? Yeah. So I think my mom's main problem too is that she did not speak Danish, so she's in this country where all these people are speaking what's basically gibberish to her. She's trying to buy food for me and they just don't have, I don't think they had any of the stuff that you can add into, smoothies and stuff to make it, extra dense. And we had to go to the pharmacy to get any sort of boost insure kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
You had to get a prescription for it. And, she's trying to communicate with these doctors here that won't, they're not specialized in eating disorders, and she doesn't even speak their language. And they're in broken English trying to explain, what's going on. And she's, she can't go to the family meetings because she doesn't understand what they're saying. So only my dad can go, and then he can kind of tell her what happened. But and my sister's in Danish school and she's, fluent and she's flourishing and she has all these friends. And I'm stuck at home, miserable. And, I feel like a baby because, my mom has to basically feed me. And yeah, we didn't, it was just the fact that we were in a foreign place at the same time. We were just trying to get used to our new house. And, my dad is at this job that, he's working long hours, and we're all just kind of in 4 different places at different times, and, kind of simultaneously avoiding each other at the same time that we all need to be together. Yeah.
What I'm so struck by in hearing this, and it parallels our experiences as well, in terms of there were a lot of complicating factors. I mean, I don't think there's any such thing as just an eating disorder ever, right? Because that's just not how life works. And yet, with all of those, sort of complications that both families had, you still were able to sort of like navigate it and pivot. I know one thing that that I think is really important. My daughter, I have 4 kids. So her 3 older siblings were in college or grad school, so they weren't sort of in the house at the same time. And that does make it, I think, it's a lot of people have smaller children, and that can be sort of complicating. I do think and always encourage people to make sure that you're saying out loud to your other kids, hey, what we're doing for this kid, we would do for you if you needed it too. Right now, this kid needs it. And I think so many times, mom guilt is sort of such a thing, but I think that we can really have parallels to fighting an eating disorder to other things. If we had a kid with cancer, we might relocate to St. Jude's, just us and that one kid, and do it there, and might leave some upheaval behind us and that sort of thing. So huge fan of really checking in with all the other kids in the family very frequently, and making sure that they sort of are apprised of the situation and all of that sort of stuff. And also letting go of the idea that you will be able to be every single thing to everyone that you were without an eating disorder in play, because you can't. So I'm a huge fan of, I'll tell people right away that is, if you have a carpool, call the carpool and say it's not a carpool anymore, it's you drive my kid. If you ever, did a meal train for someone else, don't feel ashamed to call your friends and say, we need a meal train, right? I will often tell people it's a great way to get food in your house without the agony of having the person, if your eating disorder person is one of those people like mine that really like to prevent you from alone time in the kitchen and sort of stock things and all of that sort of stuff. You get food brought to your house that has all the stuff you need in it, and it doesn't have to be cooked in your house. So really a huge fan of sort of conserving your energy in every way possible, because the eating disorder fight is such a strong, hard fight that it's hard to do too much otherwise. I'm curious, because eating disorder journeys are, even the short ones are not short. So there's still, and we do also continue to live in a culture that is sort of very full of triggering things about all of that sort of stuff. How would you say, Pepper and Yana, that, that even just today that your mom sort of supports you around whatever might be related to the eating disorder, just general mental health? What are the ways you see that? Your mom's showing up for you?
I would say in pretty much the same way. We still have an open line of communication. Like back then, I really didn't feel my emotions. Like, although we were arguing, I my emotional things like sadness or grief, I really kept inside, and it would take a long time for me to feel them. So it was like I would sit on the end of her bed, and she would walk me through feeling those emotions. So now it doesn't take me as long, maybe it's a day, but she could tell that I have a flat affect, a flat face. And she knows that means I'm not feeling my emotions, which she realized back then. So then she kind of we always call it poking, she'll poke at me because she knows that I'm upset. So she'll be like, I know there's something going on. And so then that gets me to feel, but I just, I think it's just what we formed back then, that, open line of communication still continues to this day. And, back when I had an eating disorder, there were things that I kept from her and lied, which was not in my nature. Before that, I lied all the time and didn't tell her things. But now, I pretty much tell her everything. And I think the theme is just communication, just, the communication we built back then still continues to this day.
Yeah, and I know something that had pinged for me was when you talked about the music together, that your mom knew so well that music would be that point of connection. And that's so powerful as well. And I do always encourage parents in this, that the minute you get away from the conflict, try to have a good time, try to find something have a Netflix or Hulu series that you watch together, or we learn to knit together. I'm we're the total cliche. We learn to knit, but whatever it is, or take up a musical instrument, or something that takes you away from the eating disorder, owning that interaction, so that you can, at the same time when everything's so hard, still have maybe some little bright shining lights of things. And when you described the way your mom, supported you, I sort of was thinking of, I was watching the Survivor finale last night, if somebody else watched it, and they had a challenge about making fire, right? That's what it felt like to me. Like when you're helping your kid, you said, Christine, you could always sort of see that little tiny bit of her in there. That's almost what it is taking that little spark that was so hard, one with the flint, and then just gently blowing on it, but not too hard, and adding a little more here and there. Really, really seems like how you approach things.
And it's the challenge of not blowing on the spark too hard, because you're trying to, balance this very delicate, relationship that's so complicated,
Yeah. I'm an analogy queen. So another one I like to use is, it's like being the bus driver in Speed. And that's very hard to keep that bus at 55 miles an hour. There's a lot of tension in your body when you're doing that. That's a very stressful situation. Like you're just constantly recalibrating your approach. And I think that's one of the things that makes supporting someone with an eating disorder exhausting, I think.
Yeah, I think adding to that too, we were pretty close before the eating disorder, but then, through it, I knew that we had that bond, but I was trying to get away from her. And because she was trying, we had been good friends. So, it was me like pushing against that. Like I knew she was like really trying to care for me and take care of me. And I knew she was trying to do that. And my eating disorder was like, no, like get away from me. Like, I know what you're trying to do. But as she would talk with me, it's sort of like she would help me, if we're in a big argument, or, like I was really in the eating disorder thinking, she would help, like we would talk through it and help like de-escalate me and try to get me back down to that little person inside, the true me. So she was always trying to navigate, trying to find that authentic self within me, while still at the same time trying to manage, us arguing and like the side of me that wasn't really me. So it was like, yeah, like she was saying, sort of like a not blowing on the fire too hard, but like just a little bit. And, it was definitely a challenge, I know, for you managing all of that.
I had one little sign though that I would recognize, because she was away at college, is that if she wasn't picking up the phone and wouldn't return the call, but just text me, I knew something was up, because she knew that I could, if I talked to her, I could sense there was an issue. So
yeah,
she was great at avoiding calling back.
And I think that's such an important point. And so, historically, this field had really excluded parents quite a bit. And now, luckily, there's been this shift in this recognition that parents are actually, and families are, the best hope for many people, and the best allies in treatment and that sort of thing. And so that's that spidey, I call it spidey sense. So that spidey sense thing. And I always tell people to become a student of your child and really start to observe that. And again, you've known them since birth. So you really are the ones to identify all of these things. And so I will always say that if my daughter ever texts me a picture of 2 pairs of shoes and says, which one should I choose? I'm going to make my 800-calorie muffins and jump on a plane. And go take them to her, because that's a thing for her. That indecision was a marker for her. Yana, how would you say that today your mom is still supporting you most helpfully?
I mean, there's so much that she does, but like I don't go to therapy sessions anymore, because they just aren't my favorite way of working through my issues. But I don't go to therapy, and I feel comfortable doing that because I have my mom. Like, she is my therapist. The car.
Oh no, we have a little connection issue. I'm gonna assume, is that, I'm just making sure that's not my connection issue, right? It's theirs.
Right.
Yeah.
Things that go on that I don't even tell like my best friends, because she is like, she's just kind of everything at once. Like, she's of course still my mom, but she's like, she's a friend, she's a counselor, she's a mentor, she's everything. So like, just recently, like I like I said, I have already kind of reached the peak of craziness that I can show to her. So I'm not really like ashamed of telling her anything, because she's already seen the worst of it. So I can come to her crying about something that makes absolutely no sense, and I just ramble, and all she has to do is listen. And the reason I don't like therapy is because they try to like work through it like it's a problem, and like you need to feel like you need to get out of this, but like she just lets me sit in it and like talk about it and cry and ball myself up, and you know, she lets me do that. Like I can't do that in a therapy session setting. And you know, she doesn't say you shouldn't feel that way or here's how we can fix it. It's like, okay, you feel that way, all right, like go ahead, cry it out. And she doesn't tell me that it's wrong. She doesn't immediately say, well, let's try to make you feel better. Like, how can we, this is a cognitive distortion. Like, I can't stand that. I you know, the fact that her and I just have like a kind of real connection rather than anything like forced. You know, she kind of took the place of like my treatment team, sort of.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's so important what you said too. I think Krista, that's a hard thing to learn, to learn that we actually don't need to fix things. I mean, I think that's, as parents, as moms, right, and especially in the times that we live in, right, it's almost like a new thing to learn. Oh, I'm not here to fix this. I'm just here to help survive it and to show that we can feel really hard things and that those hard feelings will pass.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, it was a very difficult skill to learn, and it was something that was taught to us when we were, well, to the parents when we were at ERC, called emotion-focused family therapy. And you know, it's really just acknowledging that, yeah, that's a really hard way to feel, because, you know, support them in terms of like why they would feel that way so that they can feel that you actually get it, rather than saying, oh no, sweetie, everything's okay. You know, that's completely invalidating. And it was hard to learn at first, but it becomes second nature, and then it just makes total sense. Like you wouldn't want somebody telling you that your problem wasn't real, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm a huge proponent of parents learning skills. The program we were in did a lot of DBT that you did with your kids as well. So she did her DBT, we did DBT as a family together, that kind of thing. And I always tell people that the beauty of that, and why I am so passionate about having the whole family included in treatment so that you can then help the person with all of these things, is never in the history of telling someone to calm down has anyone calmed down. In fact, I think most people have escalated at those words. I know that's for sure true of me. And yet, if you can say to someone, you know, sort of, I like to use the DBT skill of check the facts. If you're, you know, if your loved one is super upset, and these techniques work in all relationships because they are communication skills and they do enhance communication. If you can say, like, I see that you're really upset about that your friends all there's posted a selfie on Instagram at Starbucks without you, you know, and I can see that the story you're telling yourself is that your friends don't like you anymore and they just went without you and that was on purpose. Can we check the facts of the situation? So like, when did they go? They went after school. Remember, you had an appointment after school that day, and so I pulled you from school 15 minutes early, so you really couldn't have gone, or sort of all of these things. And so knowing, really robustly knowing those skills alongside your loved ones, I think is a huge key to being able to survive this and really help everyone through it. I want to, we want to leave some time for questions. So I want to ask one last question of moms and then daughters real quick. So Christine and Krista, what is like your number one piece of advice you'd give to other parents and caregivers who are, you know, who are in this?
I would say doing FBT is going to be your best way to full recovery. Go all in, commit yourself 100%. Know that it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult at times, but that as soon as you start to see those little glimmers of your child coming back, that will just motivate you to get to the finish line. As you can see, the relationships are not harmed, they're not ruined. In fact, I think that they come back stronger and better than before. So
thank you. Christine, what is yours?
I would say do self-care and take care of yourself, and also don't assume that it'll be solved quickly that this is you have to have perseverance through the eating disorder, and also, find ways to charge your battery. And if you have, relationships that tend to drain them more, it's okay to put those like on the outer edge of like the dartboard. Like in the middle, you have to take care of everybody who's the most important to you. And then you can nurture those other relationships at another time. But really, you need to make sure that you can take care of yourself first, because you're not going to be much help to your family member who's struggling and everybody else.
Yeah, that's so important. It is. And I used to, when I would hear self-care, it actually, honestly, in the very early days, kind of enraged me. It was like telling me to calm down, telling me to self-care. What had to happen with that, though, and I learned to do it, was really to broaden my idea of what self-care was, and to make self-care be such a smaller thing than I always thought of. And ultimately, my biggest self-care during that time was turning off any news and only listening to music. And it made a huge shift for things. And that, anybody can do that. My best piece of advice to families just starting out, and it always sounds kind of callous, but it's a lesson I had to learn pretty quickly that saved us, was you're not special. Your kid's anorexia isn't special. Like, you are special at once, because all people are special. And at the same time, the illness itself is remarkably consistent from person to person. So the things that work for most people most of the time are probably the things you ought to try, because they're likely to work for you as well. Is there a message, Pepper and Yana, like one parting message for your moms here before we dive into some questions?
Well, I want to say to my mom that I wouldn't be here without her. Without her support, I know I wouldn't be alive. She really was there for me for everything. She, would drop her life and take me to treatment, fly me across the country. She did absolutely everything for me. And at the same time, my dad had cancer. She was just so strong, managing both our care at the same time. I wouldn't be here without you. And thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very, very moving. Thank you. Yana, how are you going to top that?
I also want to say thank you, because I mean, of course, I wouldn't be here without her because she gave birth to me, but the fact that she basically reverted to, baby me, mom version of her, like, hand feeding me with her hand on my back and telling me it's okay. Like, I also would not be here without her, because I was fully prepared to die from my eating disorder, and I thought that was the best way to go. And she still saw that there was hope somewhere, even when I refused to see it. And she, sorry.
Oh, that's
I remember before we left, because I was already planning to, cut up my passport and refuse to go, because I wanted to stay there, and leave her behind and pretend that I didn't care about her. And she showed me that song from, I have no idea what movie it's from, but it was Andy Grammer, like, Don't Give Up on Me, or something to that effect. And we were all sitting downstairs in the living room, and I'm sitting on the end of the couch, like as far away from her as I possibly can be. And she's crying, and obviously she doesn't want to give up on me, and I'm turned away from her, but I was crying too, and I never told her. And I wanted more than anything for her to take me and get me better, because I could see how much she cared about me, and that, all she was concerned. She didn't hate me like I thought that she did. So I also want to thank her for putting up with me, because I know how annoying I must have been. But the fact that she could like see herself in me too, and she knew it worked for her, so she did it for me. And I can't thank her enough.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. We don't have many dry eyes here, that's for sure. Yeah, I love that you use the baby reference. Maris Degner, who I work with, I've done one of these with her mom Sharon, who I absolutely adored. Sharon describes it as, again, it is the baby phase all over again, except for this time the baby is punching you in the face and saying really mean things to you. And I thought that was super astute. And my own daughter has also done her own writing on this as well. She's done a couple pieces that have been that I'm very proud of having seen her written. And yeah, it's just that same thing. She says, I know I would be gone if you hadn't done what you had to do. And I always tell our story. I've been I do a lot of conference speaking and things like that, and we'll tell our story and all the sort of really hard things that happened and the flip the table moments and all that sort of thing. And one constant that I have is that after the conference, at some point, people will come and find me and they will say, and a lot of times they're women who are really not that much younger than I am, and definitely women in their 30s and 40s, and say, oh my gosh, I wish my mom had done that. And I always say, I guarantee you that your mom was absolutely told not to do any such thing. So it's really important to recognize that shift, and that many parents weren't given the opportunity, the tools, and were sort of actively discouraged from doing a lot of the things that we're talking about hearing today. And also recognizing that there are people who kind of do everything sort of right. I don't like the word right, but right in quotes, right? And they don't have the outcome that they would wish for. And that doesn't mean that they didn't give it their all and their heart and soul and do everything they could. What it means is that these are remarkably complicated, awful, intransigent things to heal from. So thank you so much for discussing all of this today, being so vulnerable and being so open. Did we end up with any questions, or does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, first, I just want to thank you all. I'm so moved, and I can sense that our audience and our participants are so moved. So thank you for showing up today and sharing from your hearts and sharing the truth. So we're so grateful. We did get so many questions. We definitely aren't going to get to them all. So I want to say, for those who submitted, I'm sorry if we don't get to your question. Happy to connect with you offline, or maybe to even get you in touch with
Absolutely.
our panelists if you want to continue the conversation. So you can reach out to us offline if we don't get to your question. But someone asked for the moms, as a mother having the mother gut instinct, how often did the eating disorder fool you, or was your gut usually correct? And if your gut was wrong, did you feel you lost the mother instinct for a while? And then additionally, did the medical professionals ever challenge your gut instinct, and how did you handle that?
Well, I'm going to start off by saying my gut was never wrong. In hindsight, we had the discussion and my gut was never wrong. And we were incredibly lucky. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm virtually the only person I've heard say this, that we did not have professionals who, or not our own professionals. I had other professionals say things to me about how inappropriate it was for me to be enmeshed with my college-age daughter, but our own professionals never did that. So, but 100% on the mom gut. How about you, Christine?
So at the time when she was getting treatment, I was operating on gut level because I didn't have a lot of input. We just had a doctor, an eating disorder doctor, and nutritionist. And so I actually did operate off of gut, and I listened to my gut because I could really, I didn't want to dispel what I was really feeling, and then I did have professionals with one instance. So Pepper was in New York getting treatment, doing research for a free bed, and Pepper that's where she was recovered from. And Pepper called me that she was ready to come home, and her dad was here sick, and she's in New York. And the doctor there was telling me that I was making a mistake, and Pepper's like, I need to come home. And so I went with my gut. And, and the thing is that it was a challenging time because she was also in the psychiatric hospital. That's where they did the research. And so for us, we're going against, the professionals there. And I just told Pepper, I'm coming to get you. I can tell you need to come home and that you're done with this. And they were saying, no, she needs, another month or 2 or 3 of treatment. And I did what I needed to do and got on a flight the next morning.
And it's true, like I was doing much better. I was ready to come home. My dad was sick. I needed to like be with him, and her gut instinct was so true. And them, I know they had my best, like they, wanted me to get more treatment, and they could see that, but her gut instinct was spot on.
Yeah, we are the ones living the lives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Krista, how
Well, when Yana was first getting treatment in Denmark, I think JD remembers, we identified pretty quickly that it was not going to work there. They allowed her to refuse food when she was in the hospital until she became acutely unstable. So she was allowed, while in the hospital's care, a teaching hospital no less, to refuse all food and nutrition for 6 days in a row. So
not to mention exercise in my room and go to the bathroom whenever I wanted to without any checks or anything.
Yeah.
Very irresponsible. Also, the doors to the ward were open, so I could leave whenever I wanted to.
Yeah. So I mean, basically for me, it was just knowing that where we were was not going to get her well. And again, our story is maybe a little more colorful than some, but you have to do whatever it takes. I mean, you have to be prepared to make sacrifices. I mean, it's a full-time job. So if you're working full-time, you are probably going to need to take a leave of absence. You can't just, do this part way and think that it's going to turn out okay. You really do have to go in, head first, 100% invested. For us, it meant shipping our stuff across the ocean a second time in 18 months and relocating back to the United States. So I don't think many people will have to do something that drastic, but maybe that helps to frame, like, whatever it takes is whatever it takes.
Mhm.
Right, thank you for that. Do we have time for one more? I know we're already 3 minutes over.
How
So-
are you? I'm okay with going a little longer. How are the four of you? Are you okay with a few more minutes? Good deal.
Okay, wonderful. So at one point, both Yana and Pepper touched on going against your values and really, not being connected to who that you really were at the time. So this question is kind of two-part. How do you feel like the eating disorder got you to sacrifice your values? And what did the lying make you think you were gaining? And then additionally, somebody for Pepper, you talked about getting to your authentic self. And this person wants to know for Christina also, what sort of questions you would ask to connect with her authentic self. This person says that they try really hard to connect with their daughter, but she shuts me down very quickly or holds me to an eating disorder-like standard that I cannot meet. So just, connecting to the authentic selves when you know that your kiddo is lying or going against everything that they know to be true.
So I guess for me, like the first question of not being my, true self, I guess, like doing things outside my behavior, is that when I went off to college, another part of my story was I started binge drinking because my dad was at home sick, and like, having the eating disorder, I was trying to numb my pain and not feel anything. But then I even went a step further and started engaging in dangerous behavior coupled with an eating disorder was really life-threatening. And so it was, and then, so then, when my mom didn't hear from me on the phone, she knew that, I wasn't doing well on both ends. So, it was like lying about that part of my life and lying about, how I was really doing. That was totally the level of drinking and behaviors I was doing was way different than the person I was before I had an eating disorder. So it was, doing all that was really tough. And the other part, you said the authentic self. I would say, so I always really loved the ocean growing up, and I loved, whales and all these things. And when I was unwell, I like refused to have anything to do with the ocean. Like, I didn't, when I had a favorite color that was blue, when I had an eating disorder, I didn't have a favorite color. I didn't, I really didn't care about any of that stuff anymore. So I think the way my mom got that authentic self back out was like going to the ocean. Like, even if I didn't walk on the beach and I didn't want to have anything to do with it, just like being there, just surrounding me with those things that I used to enjoy. And I think just reminding me of like who I used to be, like, remember, Pepper, like, this is who you were, and remember you like these things, remember. And I would shut her down, but I think it's just like the same perseverance of like going through the journey with the eating disorder. It's like the continue perseverance of like getting my authentic self back, and just, even if I shut her down, just keep reaching out, every time you see that spark of me inside, those are the times when she would remind me of, who I was, the things I loved. And my advice would just, no matter if, they keep shutting you down, just keep persevering, just keep at it, and it will pay off.
Beautiful, thank you. Yana, do you want to touch on that? No pressure if you don't.
Yeah. I think my eating disorder got me to sacrifice my values very gradually. So at first it would be, I would lie about something, but it would be, something that my mom would never find out about. So, I would do something behind her back that, I'm at school and like, it doesn't, I'm alone. So it doesn't feel as bad because there's no like witness in that sense. Like I wouldn't directly, defy her. The whole way that my eating disorder started anyway was that I was like throwing away food at school, like I would throw away my lunch and things like that. And, it made me feel terrible because my mom had made it for me too. And like, I would cry, thinking about what like symbolically I was doing. I was basically saying I didn't care about her. And so, but it was like gradual, but the reason I was able to kind of toss those values aside, I was in a different country. I now had friends. I had never really had like great friends when I lived in America. So now I had this like other standard I wanted to live up to. My friends were very thin. They were healthy in my idea of healthy. So like it felt like I was more trying to fit in than I was really trying to like move away from anything. It just felt like I was becoming a different person. Until, obviously it was too late and I was like so far gone from, who I was. And like how you said that you kind of ignored the ocean and things like that. Like I wouldn't read, I wouldn't write because it reminded me too much of who I was forgetting about. Like I forgot little Yana that wrote stories for fun and, would play outside and pick around in the dirt. I wouldn't go outside. I didn't want to be reminded of myself. I didn't want to be happy because I knew that would mean the loss of my eating disorder. So like originally it was, I'm sacrificing my values, but I'm going to have this perfect body. I'm going to be in control. I'm going to be like my skinny friends. I'm going to be able to go to the parties that they go to, and I'm going to look good in the outfits that they wear. I'll be able to wear crop tops and, I'll look good in whatever pictures they take of me. And then after it was beyond, just the body, it was like, yes, you're sacrificing your values, but, you have control and your mind is satisfied, because you're giving into what it's asking you to do. But so the way that I kind of got that back, and it's funny, Pepper, that you say the ocean story, because one of my days off that, my mom took me out of school to give me like a mental health day break, she took me to the beach. And in Denmark, the waters are like crystal blue and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And I was pretending it didn't make me happy, but those, those few minutes that I was able to have to, kind of walk along the beach, even though I wasn't even walking next to my mom and I was like kind of still, in solitude, like getting back with nature too, and being reminded that like natural instinct is to eat. And, I wouldn't deny an animal food and, all living things have to eat. Things like that was what really helped me. And And then, to remember what, little me loved to do. I love to eat. I love to cook. I loved being outside and eating. I would eat my dinners outside in the summer. So I started trying to do that again. I would bring my food outside. Also looking at baby pictures, not even baby pictures, like, baby pictures, but then also like toddler pictures where I was obviously very happy, especially ones where I have food in front of me, like how happy I was to eat. Like I'm looking at her and I wouldn't say, no, Yana, don't eat that cake. That'll make you fat. I'm looking at her like, look, she's having a great time on her 5th birthday and she's eating her favorite cheesecake. And, I wouldn't, if I were in front of her, I wouldn't tell her no. So, I'm still her though. So why am I telling her that she can't? And then also remembering how much I loved school and learning and, and reading and writing and like how much of like, because that took precedence over everything in my younger years. So to remember that, I can't read and write and work in school to my best ability if I'm not eating. So I was kind of sacrificing education for, perfect body that I never got. So it's like, I recognize that shift of, caring about something like education that's, really going to be beneficial to me versus caring about food and how I look and calories and weight. Like what really matters most to me, my body never mattered to me before I had an eating disorder. So like it was getting back in touch with like what really mattered. And that was also, facing, actually looking at my younger self and, remembering in that way.
That nostalgia can be so powerful. I know a lot of families who really use that as tools. And that was one of my daughter's recovery techniques. Sounds very similar to yours, was she would always have, sort of in her bedroom or her dorm room or when she traveled, like just some pictures of all through life, having fun with her family, with her siblings, with her friends, those things, so that she could like look at her life before she went to sleep and look at her life when she woke up and realize that that's my life. This isn't my life. And for the folks here, there's people here who have kids of all ages, and for the folks who have kids young enough that you can sort of impact it, because I want to highlight that, Yana, you weren't able to think like that until you had some nutritional rehabilitation. Like that was to get your brain there. That's not where your brain started. It got there because you were able to use those techniques because of the nutritional rehabilitation. For those folks who have young adults, children who are in what we call the transitional age youth group, which are basically, sort of up to about 25 or so when they're still financially dependent on you. One of the things when I have conversations with clinicians who we fundamentally disagree about the role of independence and that kind of thing in someone of that age, I'll always say, I personally hold as a core value that autonomy is not more important than living free of an eating disorder. And so, if I had to stay in the picture long enough to get rid of the eating disorder, and then I could step out in an appropriate way for someone of her age, but I wasn't going to step out too soon and leave her to the eating disorder. That was not how it was going to go down.
All right. I mean, we could go on and on, but I really just want to be respectful of everybody's time and thank our presenters again and for sharing your stories and for being here. And if people want to continue the conversation, I put our email in there and I can get your questions to the presenters. So please email us.
Well, and you know what I want to offer, and I'm gonna volunteer at least a couple of the people on this call because we all work together, right? We could even jump on a Zoom all together, just ourselves, answer the questions just how we have this way, and send them to you to share with the people that have asked as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. So I will keep a list of the questions and I will give them to JD, and then we will send an email out to everyone with some answers. So thank you so much for that. And Pepper and Yana, your stories are incredible. So keep doing the good work, and you're inspiring a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course, anytime, you're welcome back. So thanks everyone for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank
you for having us.
Bye-bye.